Over the last few months, I've been using the Nothing Phone 3 as my primary Android device. I have quite a bit of thoughts throughout my usage, primarily using it on Verizon's network as well. So if you're curious how the Nothing Phone 3 works on the Verizon network here in the US, I'll let you know here shortly. Let's jump right into it. Initially, there was a lot of conversation about the overall design aesthetic of this device. I have to say, much like others had mentioned in their reviews, in person, the device does look a bit better. Not super impressed with the camera layout on the back of the device, but the overall feel in hand is durable. It does feel premium, much like the previous Nothing Phone 2. Upon initial use, I do miss the previous glyph lighting on the Nothing Phone 2 compared to the new glyph interface found on the Nothing Phone 3. Personally, I find it a bit gimmicky, but I also seem to miss notifications often with the glyph interface given how small the overall interface really is.
The Nothing Phone 3 again feels premium, and gimmicks aside, it's quite a nice device that does turn heads out in public often given its unique camera layout and aesthetic. It does feel again reminiscent of the Nothing Phone 2 and the Phone 1 that preceded this device. It's very interesting to see that they carried this design forward, and I'm curious what future phones will look like. The display is bright and looks great in most lighting conditions. Thanks to Nothing OS paired with the Snapdragon chipset on board here, the Nothing Phone 3 performs well, and it's quite a snappy device, which I would hope so given its rather staggering price point. Overall, I have quite enjoyed dailying this device though. While maybe it's cool for marketing, maybe cool for a quick party trick, I have not found the glyph interface that exciting or intriguing. It got rather stale for me personally, and I just used it for the clock over time for a quick glance at the time throughout my day. Now, you could do this easily with always on display, of course, so again, not really sure who this glyph interface is for anymore. I'm also not sure how developers over time really adopt this, especially if nothing continues to change the interface every so many generations. It gets really hard for developers to invest their time, money, and efforts into something that's ever evolving and not really bringing much features to the actual device.
Using the Nothing Phone 3 in the US is quite interesting in terms of carrier connectivity. It works best on T-Mobile, okay on AT&T, and then with Verizon it's been rather inconsistent. It does work provided you use a physical SIM, even though the Nothing Phone 3 does have the capability of eSIM built in. Verizon hasn't been the best to work with in terms of activating on eSIM specifically, so I used a physical SIM card. Using the physical SIM card, after about 2 to 3 days, Verizon actually totally killed my SIM card, noting that the device wasn't compatible on their network. I then had to reactivate a SIM card, a physical SIM card, in that Nothing Phone 3. It then proceeded to work the rest of my journey using the Nothing Phone 3. However, it was rather inconsistent in areas where typically I have the best coverage. I found it would often switch between LTE, 4G, 5G, very rapidly within a matter of seconds, and a few times I actually caught that on camera. So just note that it's not going to be very consistent, at least on Verizon's network, if you intend to use the Nothing Phone 3 on Verizon. Does it work? Yes, decently enough, but again, I wouldn't recommend it. I think the Nothing Phone 3 here in the US is probably best served for those on T-Mobile or T-Mobile MVNOs like Google Fi.
I still have to give credit where it's due. Nothing still has the best change logs for their updates.
Now, on the cameras aren't terrible on the Nothing Phone 3. Are they my favorite to shoot with in terms of mobile photography? Absolutely not. I actually found that the Nothing Phone 3 cameras seem to be a little bit worse than the Nothing Phone 2's cameras, which is very interesting given the timeline and the time it took for the Nothing Phone 3 to ultimately become the official successor to the Nothing Phone 2. Waiting months and months, years to get a new successor to the Nothing Phone 2, I would have hoped for much better cameras, but in all honesty, with all the updates the Nothing Phone 2 had, I found that the cameras were best served on the Nothing Phone 2 in comparison to the Nothing Phone 3.
In the camera app, there's some solid built-in camera filters if you're into that. Photos aren't terrible, like I said, at least not for quick sharing with friends and family or posting on socials. Just know that you're not getting the best cameras compared to other devices at this price point or even for less. Of course, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on a few of these photos that I took. Some I did use some of the built-in filter options that Nothing has and Nothing OS in their camera app. But again, I just wasn't that impressed. I think the macro mode was pretty impressive given how long nothing has been producing these devices for. I think that was an improvement for sure, and that's nice to have here on the Nothing Phone 3. But overall, I just felt like most of my photos were lacking in color science, color accuracy. Some, again, don't look terrible, but once you get them onto your desktop and you start zooming in, you start to really notice where the quality's lost, and then you start to think about the other devices at this price point, and that's where it gets very difficult to recommend these cameras.
Battery on the Nothing Phone 3 has also served me quite well. Over the course of my usage, I found that I get easily 8 to 9 hours of screen on time. Even with heavy usage, I'm not scrambling to charge it before the end of my day. So I think in terms of battery, Nothing absolutely nailed it here on the Nothing Phone 3. No concerns in terms of battery or charging. The charging, again, charges quite rapidly, so if you do need to top off in the middle of your day, you'll be able to do so quite quickly. And using things like screen copy and local send with my Nothing Phone 3, I'm able to easily sync it between my custom PC and my device, so no concerns there. Those also work very nicely here. For those watching my channel, you know that I've been on a journey of using Linux paired with Android devices, and so far it's been working out quite nicely. More to come on videos on my Linux journey, so definitely stay tuned for that and subscribe for more videos coming soon. But in terms of the Nothing Phone 3, paired with my custom PC, it's worked quite nicely, and I haven't had any issues in terms of compatibility or any issues using that device specifically with my custom PC. Now, again, these same apps work with Windows as well, so you won't have any issues there, I would anticipate, either. Now, in terms of the overall device, what are my thoughts? Well, the Nothing Phone 3, again, has been a very interesting device considering that we waited so long for a successor to the Nothing Phone 2. Is it really the successor that lives up to the hype? I would say not necessarily. I think if you have a Phone 2, you don't really need to upgrade. I think the Nothing Phone 2 is still serving many people quite well. Now, I think in terms of the Nothing Phone 3, it is very expensive for what it is, and you can get a ton of other devices with much better specs, better cameras, etc., better support. Overall, I think if you are a huge fan, though, of the Nothing Phone lineup and you're a huge fan of Nothing and CMF and what they're doing with their brand and their software, then yes, maybe the Nothing Phone 3 is for you. I think if you can get it on resale or if you can get a really good deal on sale on the device, then maybe pick it up. But at full retail, it is really hard for me to recommend to most people, and I think you would be better off going with another device from Samsung, Google, especially here in the US, given the network compatibility alone. But again, if you're looking for something totally different, totally new, definitely pick up this device and check it out. If you did pick it up, let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the Nothing Phone 3. I look forward to that discussion, and as always, thank you for watching. Take care and stay safe.